Ever feel like you need, I don't know, a nutritional decoder ring just to walk down the grocery store aisles?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know that feeling.
Seriously, one label screams high fiber, another promises omega-3 power.
hmm
You see supplements absolutely everywhere, and suddenly your grandmother's remedies are trending online. It's a lot, right?
It absolutely is. Trying to figure out what's genuinely healthy.
Yeah. The information landscape around food and health is just incredibly dense and honestly often confusing.
It really can be.
And that's exactly why we're diving in today. We've pulled together a fascinating stack of material, mostly excerpts from a really detailed text all about health foods, plus some helpful visual guides we found.
It's like good stuff.
Our mission in this deep dive, to try and cut through some of that noise, pull out the truly important insights, the aha moments you need,
hmm
and make sense of what all these different foods and components actually do in your body.
Okay, so we'll start with the basics. The fundamental science of how our bodies even use food. Then we'll unpack the big players, carbs, fats, proteins.
The macros.
Exactly. And the crucial supporting cast, vitamins and minerals. Then, yeah, we'll take a closer look at how specific foods and plants are marketed for health benefits, comparing those sort of traditional claims with what the science in our sources is telling us.
Think of us as your guides, basically, navigating this information with you so you can feel a bit more confident and well-informed.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
So where do we even begin trying to understand how food fuels us? It has to be with energy, right?
Exactly. That's the foundation. At its core, maintaining your body weight is really about energy balance.
Simple math, almost.
Sort of. Our sources give a general range for adult energy needs, somewhere between, say, 1,500 and 3,000 kilocalories, or ACAL, per day.
Quite a range.
It is. Depends on activity level, size, all sorts.
Yeah.
But the principle holds. Go consistently above that intake, and you'll likely gain weight. Stay consistently below, and you'll lose weight. That's the basic equation.
And this energy comes primarily from our macronutrients.
Correct. Carbohydrates, fats, and protein are the main sources. Plus, we shouldn't forget, alcohol also contributes energy.
Right, so carbs and protein give you, what was it, about 4 kilocal per gram?
Roughly, yes. Around 4 kilocal per gram for both. Alcohol's a bit higher, around 7 kilocal per gram.
But the real energy density comes from fat.
Right. Fat is easily the most concentrated source at about 9 kilocal per gram.
Wow, more than double carbs or protein gram for gram.
Exactly. Which immediately highlights a really important point. Very few foods are just one macronutrient, are they?
No, almost nothing is pure protein or pure fat.
Precisely. So the total energy in a food is determined by the specific mix of carbs, fats, and protein it contains. That's why, a cookie and a piece of chicken breast, even if they weigh the same, have vastly different calorie counts.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk carbohydrates then. We often just lump them together as sugars and starches, but your body's interaction with them is, well, way more complex than that, isn't it?
It really is. Digestion actually starts slightly in your mouth with salivary amylase, but the main action happens down in the small intestine.
Okay.
Enzymes there, primarily these alpha amylases, break carbs down into simple sugars or monosaccharides, things like glucose.
And those get absorbed.
Yes, absorbed into your bloodstream. And that leads to what we call the glycemic response, basically, how your blood glucose, your blood sugar, goes up after you eat.
Right, I've heard of that. The sources show blood sugar typically rises pretty quickly, maybe peaking around 30 minutes after eating.
That's typical. And then insulin kicks in to help bring it back down, usually back to baseline within about 2 hours or so.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, according to the source.
Yes.
Not all carbohydrate-containing foods cause the same glycemic response.
Yes. This is a crucial nugget. It's definitely not just about the total grams of carbs you eat.
So what makes the difference then? What influences that response?
Well, it's a whole list of things, really. Is it a simple sugar just dissolved in liquid, like in a sugary drink? Or is it bound up within a complex food structure?
Okay, structure matters.
Hugely. The type of starch matters, too. The ratio of amylose to amylopectin affects how easily it gets digested. Then there's the presence of dietary fiber, what the source also calls non-starch polysaccharides, or NSP. That's key.
Fiber slows things down.
It can, yes. Even the physical form of the food. Think about finely ground flour versus, say, whole grains or large particles that changes things.
Right.
How you cook it, and crucially, what else you eat with it, like adding fat or protein to the meal. All of these influence the speed and the height of that blood sugar spike.
So what does this all mean then? It really raises an important question. Does just counting grams of carbs tell you the whole story about how a food impacts your blood sugar?
Based on all these variables, almost certainly not.
Yeah. The type of carb and maybe more importantly, how it's presented in that whole food matrix seems just as important, if not more so.
Absolutely. And speaking of those non-starch polysaccharides, let's dig into dietary fiber a bit more because that adds another layer of complexity and, well, benefit.
Okay. I know there can be some confusion with the terminology sometimes.
There can be, yeah. You hear total dietary fiber and NSP. But the key insight from our sources here is that different types of fiber have different effects on your health. It's not monolithic.
Okay, so it's not just one thing called fiber.
Exactly. Think of the less fermentable cereal NSPs, like cellulose you get in wheat bran. That's the type traditionally associated with, aiding digestion, promoting bowel regularity.
Right, bulking things up.
Yes, helping with conditions like constipation and maybe some bowel diseases. It adds bulk, like you said.
Okay.
That's the roughage we often hear about.
Gotcha.
But then you have the other kind, the more fermentable, soluble NSPs, things like the beta-glucans you find in oats or gar gum.
And they behave differently.
Very differently. These are the ones that tend to dissolve in water and form a sort of gel. They can have different impacts, like potentially helping to lower blood cholesterol levels. And they can also help modulate or sort of smooth out the blood glucose response after a meal.
Ah, okay. And this is where you see specific ingredients being pulled out and added to products, right, to make health claims.
Yes, precisely. Manufacturers can extract or concentrate these different types of fiber and then add them to other foods, yogurts, bars, cereals. These are then often marketed as health foods or functional foods, specifically because of that added component.
Interesting. It's also fascinating how fiber interacts with our gut bacteria. That seems like a huge topic now.
Oh, it's a massive area of research. Those non-starch polysaccharides and even some resistant starch that doesn't get digested higher up eventually reach the large intestine.
Okay.
And down there, they become a major food source for the trillions of bacteria living in our gut.
Fuel for the microbiome.
Exactly. This fermentation process produces really important compounds called short-chain fatty acids, things like butyrate, which is thought to be crucial for the health of the colon cells themselves, and acetate and propionate, which your body can actually absorb and use for energy.
And the less glamorous byproduct.
Yes. It also, as many people know from experience, produces gas as a byproduct of that fermentation.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's move on to fats. We know they're calorie dense, obviously, but their role in health feels like it's constantly being debated or redefined.
Their relationship with health is certainly complex, and yeah, our understanding has definitely evolved as we've learned more.
The source mentions cis and trans fats.
Yes. When we look at unsaturated fats, there's this distinction. Cis fats are the common, naturally occurring ones, the shape our body prefers. Trans fats are much less common naturally, but they get produced when liquid oils are partially hydrogenated during food processing.
Like in making some margarines or shortenings, historically.
Exactly, though much less common now due to regulations. High intakes of these artificial trans fats are now widely understood to act similarly to saturated fats in their negative effects on blood cholesterol.
Okay. And then there are the fats our bodies actually need but can't make themselves.
Yes, the essential fatty acids. You absolutely have to get these from your diet. These fall into two main families, the N3s, which we call omega-3s, and the N6s, or omega-6s.
Linoleic and linolenic acid.
Those are the parent compounds, yes. Linoleic acid for N6 and alpha-linolenic acid for N3. Our sources give recommended daily intakes for these, usually as a percentage of your total energy intake.
The biggest health concern historically linked to dietary fat, especially saturated fat, has always been cardiovascular disease, hasn't it?
That link is pretty well established, particularly from large epidemiological studies. High total fat intake, and particularly high saturated fat intake, is associated with atherosclerosis.
That's the hardening and narrowing of the arteries.
Correct. And consequently, coronary heart disease. Higher levels of cholesterol circulating in the blood correlate with higher risk. This cholesterol is carried around by lipoproteins, mainly LDL and HDL.
The ones we always hear called bad and good cholesterol.
Right, that's the common shorthand. The general picture presented in our sources is that saturated fats tend to increase LDL, the bad cholesterol that can contribute to plaque buildup.
Okay.
Polyunsaturated fats, like many vegetable oils, can lower total cholesterol, but the source notes they might also lower HDL, the good kind, slightly.
And monounsaturated. Olive oil, avocados.
They seem to have a more favorable profile according to the source. Little negative effect on LDL, maybe even raise it slightly less than carbs, but they help maintain HDL levels, which is generally considered protective.
So how does this LDL stuff relate to those fatty streaks forming in the arteries? What's the process there?
Well, the simplified model described is that LDL cholesterol, especially when it gets oxidized by free radicals in the body, is taken up by scavenger cells, immune cells called macrophages, in the artery wall. Okay. These macrophages get loaded with fat and turn into what are called foam cells. These foam cells build up and contribute to those fatty streaks, the very early stages of atherosclerosis that narrow the artery.
Interesting. The source mentioned some ongoing discussion about the role of different unsaturated fats in that process.
Yeah, it notes some scientific debate or nuances there, suggesting perhaps that monounsaturated fats might be particularly protective in this context, maybe even helping to reduce the tendency for blood clots to form. Blood clots are often the final catastrophic trigger for a heart attack or stroke.
So based on all this, what's the sort of general advice that usually comes out?
The common guidance from health authorities, as mentioned in the sources, often revolves around limiting total fat to less than, say, 30% of your total energy intake.
Okay.
And within that total fat, the advice is often to keep saturated fat below 10%, polyunsaturated fat also may be below 10%, and then the remainder, ideally, coming from those monounsaturated sources.
This is also why we hear so much noise about fish oil, isn't it? The omega-3s.
Exactly. Those very long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, which are found abundantly in oily fish like salmon, mackerel, herring.
The good stuff.
Yeah. There's strong evidence suggesting they are protective against coronary heart disease. This has led to widespread recommendations to include oily fish in your diet regularly, maybe once or twice a week.
And for people who don't eat fish.
Well, these omega-3s, EPA and DHA, are also available as supplements, often derived from fish oil or sometimes algae oil for vegetarian options.
And manufacturers have really taken this idea of specific fats influencing cholesterol and run with it, haven't they? Creating those specialized spreads.
Yes, the plant stanol and sterol-enriched products. Benecol, Proactive, those types mentioned in the sources. This is a prime example of functional food.
How do they actually work?
It's quite clever. These plant compounds have a chemical structure very similar to cholesterol. Because of that similarity, they basically compete with cholesterol for absorption in your gut.
So they block it.
They partially block the absorption of cholesterol you eat in your food, and this is quite significant. They also reduce the reabsorption of cholesterol that your own body secretes into the gut via bile.
Oh.
So to make more bile acids, your body has to pull more cholesterol out of your bloodstream, which effectively lowers your blood cholesterol levels. Pretty neat mechanism.
Very clever.
Mhm.
Okay, let's switch gears to proteins often called the body's building blocks.
Absolutely fundamental. They're the main source of nitrogen in our diet and are absolutely essential for building and repairing all our body tissues, muscle, skin, organs, and for making critical compounds like enzymes, hormones, antibodies.
Huge range of jobs.
Massive. In a typical diet, they might provide about 10 to 20% of our energy, though, frankly, many people in developed countries consume quite a bit more protein than the minimum required for basic health.
How does our body actually process them? What happens after we eat protein?
Well, proteins are digested primarily in the stomach and then the small intestine. They get broken down into their smaller components. Individual amino acids and short chains of amino acids called peptides.
Okay.
These are then absorbed into the bloodstream. From there, the body uses them primarily for protein synthesis, making new body proteins, enzymes, hormones, even neurotransmitters like serotonin. Or if you eat more protein than your body needs for all those building and regulatory functions, the excess amino acids can be stripped of their nitrogen, and the remaining carbon structure can be used for energy, or potentially converted to fat if energy intake is excessive overall.
And there's this concept of protein quality that comes up. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, protein quality is important. It basically relates to how well the protein you eat matches your body's specific needs for amino acids and how easily digestible it is.
Amino acids.
Yeah,
The building blocks of protein.
exactly. Our bodies can make some amino acids, but there are others called essential amino acids that we absolutely have to get from our diet because we can't synthesize them. A high-quality protein provides all these essential amino acids in proportions that closely match what the human body needs, and it's easily broken down and absorbed. Animal proteins, like those from eggs or milk, are often used as reference standards because they have an excellent balance.
Does that mean plant proteins aren't as good then? Is that the implication?
Not necessarily not as good, but they often have what we call limiting amino acids. This just means they might be relatively low in one or more of those essential amino acids compared to our requirements.
For example.
Well, legumes like beans and lentils tend to be lower in methionine and cysteine, while cereals like wheat or rice are often lower in lysine.
But we don't usually just eat like a bowl of plain lentils, do we?
Precisely. This is a really key insight, especially for vegetarian or vegan diets, by combining different plant protein sources within the same meal or even over the course of a day.
Like the classic beans on toast example the source gives.
Exactly like beans on toast. The beans are low in methionine, the toast cereal is low in lysine. Put them together and you get a much more complete, high-quality amino acid pattern in that single meal. It really highlights why a varied diet, even a fully plant-based one, is so important for getting all the essential nutrients.
So protein deficiency, when it happens in developed countries, isn't usually about poor quality protein?
Generally, no. It's less often about the quality of the protein being eaten and more likely due to overall insufficient total food intake, like in cases of extreme poverty or illness, or perhaps relying very heavily on diets that are extremely low in protein content overall, like certain highly restrictive diets.
Okay, got it. So beyond the big energy providers, the macros, we have the essential micronutrients,
Yeah.
vitamins and minerals. Our source provides a pretty handy table listing many of them, their sources, and their main jobs in the body.
Yeah, these are absolutely vital. They're the catalysts, the cofactors, the spark plugs that make everything else work smoothly. Think calcium for bone structure and nerve function, iron for carrying oxygen in your blood, zinc involved in countless enzyme systems. The list goes on.
The source does highlight a few potential areas where people might fall short, even in generally well-fed populations.
That's true. Iron deficiency is a notable one, particularly mentioned for women of childbearing age due to menstrual losses, infants transitioning to solid foods, toddlers who can be picky eaters, and also vegetarians or vegans who aren't careful to combine plant-based iron sources with things like vitamin C to boost absorption.
Right. And zinc deficiency.
Zinc deficiency is also mentioned with potential symptoms like poor appetite, perhaps slow wound healing or changes in taste perception. It's involved in so many bodily processes.
Selenium is an interesting case study mentioned, where a big national dietary shift actually had an impact on intake.
It really is a fascinating example. The source notes that in the UK, years ago, bread making predominantly used high selenium North American wheat. When the source shifted more towards lower selenium UK-grown wheat, the average selenium intake in the population actually dropped significantly.
Wow.
Yeah. And this potentially makes vegetarians, especially vegans who avoid dairy and eggs, which are other sources, perhaps more vulnerable to lower intakes if they aren't getting it from other places like Brazil nuts.
Okay, vitamins are the other half of the micronutrient team. We know them by their letters A, B, C, D, E, K.
Yeah, the naming convention is a bit historical, isn't it? They were discovered and named somewhat alphabetically initially. Vitamin B turned out to be not just one thing, but a whole complex of several distinct compounds, hence B1, thiamine, B2, riboflavin, B6, B12, etc.
And they're classified based on solubility.
Broadly, yes. Fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K can be stored in the body's fat tissues for longer periods. This means daily intake isn't always strictly necessary if you have stores, but it also means toxicity is more possible with very high intakes from supplements.
And the water-soluble ones.
Water-soluble vitamins, that's the B vitamin complex and vitamin C, are generally not stored in significant amounts. Your body uses what it needs, and any excess is usually excreted in urine. So you generally need a more regular intake of these.
Thankfully, really severe, obvious vitamin deficiency diseases like scurvy from lack of vitamin C or biliary from lack of thiamine are pretty rare now in developed countries.
That's largely true, thankfully, due to better food availability, fortification of staples like flour and cereals, and generally more varied diets. But the source does make the point that subclinical deficiencies, meaning levels that are lower than optimal, but not yet causing a full-blown obvious disease, can potentially still occur.
Like what kind of subtle things?
Well, maybe some subtle nerve issues could potentially link back to low thiamine, B1, or perhaps persistently poor wound healing could hint at lower vitamin C levels, things that might not immediately scream deficiency disease.
Right. And this inevitably brings us to the huge world of supplements. They are absolutely everywhere, promising everything under the sun.
Indeed they are. The source nicely presents two common perspectives on supplements that you often hear.
Okay, what are they?
Well, first, there's the more orthodox view, often held by dietitians and nutrition scientists. It's generally best to get your nutrients from whole foods.
Why is that?
because foods contain this incredibly complex matrix of compounds, not just the vitamins and minerals we know about, but potentially thousands of other phytochemicals, fibers, and other components that likely work together synergistically. Plus, you get the fiber, the energy, the enjoyment of food itself.
Makes sense. But there's the insurance policy idea too, right?
Right. That's the other perspective.
Hmm.
That supplements can be a useful backup, maybe an insurance policy, if you know your diet isn't consistently varied or balanced, or if you have specific increased needs like during pregnancy or for certain medical conditions.
If someone does choose to take a supplement, is there any general advice from the source on how to choose one?
Yes, the main advice mentioned is to generally aim for supplements that provide around 100% of the recommended daily intake, or RD/RNI for each nutrient.
Not those mega doses you sometimes see.
Exactly. Taking significantly higher doses, especially of fat-soluble vitamins like A and D, or certain minerals like iron or zinc, can lead to adverse effects or toxicity over time. And there's a very strong caution in the source about consulting a health professional, a doctor, dietitian, or pharmacist,
Especially for certain things.
particularly before taking iron supplements, as excess iron can be harmful, especially for people with certain genetic conditions. And definitely when considering any supplements for infants and young children, where needs and tolerances are very different.
Okay, so taking all these building blocks, we've talked about the macros, micros, fiber, energy, everything. How are we generally advised to put it all together on our plate day to day? Our sources included examples of those visual food guides.
Ah, yes, things like the UK's Balance of Good Health plate model or the traditional USA food pyramid that were shown in the sources. These are really attempts by public health bodies to translate all that complex nutritional science into simple, practical visual guidance for everyday eating.
They seem to focus on proportions of different food groups rather than just nutrients.
That's exactly the point. They suggest filling the largest portions of your plate or building the base of your diet with things like fruits, vegetables, and starchy foods, preferably whole grains, then having slightly smaller portions of protein sources, meat, fish, beans, etc., and dairy or dairy alternatives.
And the top of the pyramid or the smallest slices?
Right, those represent foods high in fats and sugars, which should be consumed in smaller amounts or less frequently. It's really about guiding towards a balanced overall pattern of eating, which is often more effective and sustainable than just trying to track dozens of individual nutrients in isolation.
Okay, great overview of the basics.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears a bit and dig into some of those specific foods and plants that are often talked about or marketed specifically for their health benefits, drawing on the examples in the material you provided.
Right, moving beyond basic nutrition to these health foods or supplements.
Yeah, we see this huge market for herbal products presented as dietary supplements these days.
We do. And it's important to realize, as the source points out, that the legal status and the amount of scientific backing required to make claims about these products varies enormously between countries.
How so?
While some places, like Germany, with its Historical Commission E monographs, have quite rigorous processes for evaluating traditional herbal medicines based on available scientific evidence. Other countries might have much less stringent regulations for products sold as dietary supplements, so the level of proof behind a claim can really differ.
Okay, let's look at a few interesting examples from the source material then. How about algae? Things like spirulina or chlorella that you see in health food stores.
Yeah, these are often marketed as superfoods, usually available as tablets or powders. Nutritionally, the source notes they do have a decent profile. They contain protein, some vitamins, some minerals. Then you have the larger seaweeds like kelp or nori.
Stuff used in sushi or soups.
Exactly, used directly in food in many cultures, particularly in Asia. They're also important industrial sources of thickening agents like agars and carrageenans, which are used widely in processed foods.
But the source points out a specific nutritional aspect of seaweed we need to be aware of. Iodine, right?
Yes, that's a key point. Seaweeds, especially kelp, can be extremely high in iodine. Now, iodine is essential for making thyroid hormones, but getting way too much, particularly from concentrated supplements or very high seaweed consumption, can actually backfire and disrupt thyroid function.
So the kelp tablets for slimming.
The source specifically cautions about using kelp products for weight loss. It notes there's little scientific evidence to support that claim, and you run the risk of getting excessive iodine intake, which isn't good.
Okay. What about bee products? The source mentions propolis and royal jelly.
Right. Propolis is that resinous stuff bees collect. It has a very long history of use in traditional medicine, with claims ranging from antimicrobial to anti-inflammatory effects, used both externally on wounds and internally.
And royal jelly, the stuff for the queen bee.
That's the one. It's marketed with various therapeutic claims, often positioned as promoting vitality or longevity.
But what does the evidence say, according to the source?
Well, the source notes that for royal jelly, there's actually rather limited scientific evidence to back up many of the therapeutic claims made about it. For propolis, it does show some antimicrobial activity in lab tests, which could potentially lend some support to certain traditional uses, maybe for wound healing or sore throats. But the strength of the evidence for many specific internal health claims wasn't detailed extensively in the provided material.
Okay. Evening primrose oil is one that seems to have some more specific support mentioned in the text.
It does seem to. This oil is valued primarily for its content of essential fatty acids, particularly linoleic acid and omega-6,
Hmm.
and gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, which is less common.
And the evidence.
The source indicates there's evidence supporting its therapeutic use for conditions like atopic eczema, which is a type of inflammatory skin condition. It also mentions ongoing research exploring its potential benefits for things like PMS, premenstrual syndrome, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and maybe effects on blood lipids and blood pressure. So it suggests it's an area with some scientific backing and ongoing interest.
Ginger is obviously a common kitchen staple, but it's also used medicinally quite a lot.
Absolutely. Ginger has really strong traditional uses across many cultures, particularly for digestive issues and nausea. And the source notes there is some scientific evidence that supports some of these claims.
Like what?
It's known to have antispasmodic effects, which might help with cramps. It shows antibacterial properties in vitro. And some studies have indeed supported its traditional use for calming motion sickness or nausea, although the source might suggest results aren't always perfectly consistent across all studies.
And the active components.
Thought to be mainly the essential oils and pungent compounds called gingerols.
Ginseng is another famous one, often called an adaptogen. What does that term actually mean in this context?
Yeah, the source defines an adaptogen as something believed to increase the body's non-specific resistance to various kinds of stress, whether physical, chemical, or biological. It's thought to help prevent fatigue and act as a general tonic, helping the body adapt.
And there are different types.
Yes, importantly, there's Korean or Chinese ginseng from the Panax species. There's American ginseng, also Panax, but slightly different. And then there's Siberian ginseng, which is actually a different plant, Eleutherococcus senticosus.
So they're not all the same.
Not chemically, no. While they're all commonly called ginseng, they contain different main active compounds. The Panax types are known for ginsenosides, while Siberian ginseng contains compounds called eleutherosides. Claims often include immune stimulation and anti-fatigue effects, but the specifics might vary between types.
Interesting. Hemp seed has become quite popular recently. What does the source say about it?
It's definitely gaining recognition, and based on the source description, for good reason. It's described as being highly nutritious,
In what way?
rich in oil, protein, and fiber. The oil is highlighted as having a good ratio of essential fatty acids, including both linoleic, omega-6, and alpha-linolenic acid, omega-3. Crucially, the protein in hemp seed is noted as containing all the essential amino acids, making it a complete protein, and it's said to be very easily digestible. Plus, it's a source of various vitamins and minerals, so nutritionally quite packed.
Milk thistle is one that's strongly linked to liver health in traditional medicine.
Very strongly linked. It has a really long history, used for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, specifically for liver problems like damage from toxins or alcohol.
Does science back this up?
The source indicates there is scientific evidence supporting the use of a complex of compounds found in the seeds, collectively called silymarin. It's shown benefit, often as a supportive treatment alongside conventional medicine, for inflammatory liver conditions and even cirrhosis. Although, interestingly, the source notes it's often found to be most effective when given by injection in clinical settings, which might suggest some challenges with absorption or delivery when taken orally, but it's still widely used that way.
Nuts. Generally seen as healthy these days, but they always come with that calorie warning, don't they?
Huh. Yes, both are true. They are absolutely nutrient-dense little powerhouses. The source lists protein, healthy unsaturated fats, fiber, vitamins like vitamin E, and minerals.
Like selenium and Brazil nuts.
Exactly. Brazil nuts are a standout source of selenium. Plus, nuts are naturally cholesterol-free and contain various antioxidants. Big UT, yes, the calorie density is significant. The source points out that even a small handful, maybe around 30 grams, can easily pack 200 kilocalories.
And they're easy to overeat?
That's the other point the source humorously makes. They're often described as more-ish, meaning you tend to want to keep eating them. They don't always trigger strong satiety signals that make you stop naturally. So yeah, portion size definitely matters with nuts.
Okay. Probiotics and prebiotics. These are huge trends. Let's make sure we clarify the difference based on the source.
Yeah, good idea. The terms are sometimes unfortunately used interchangeably, but they are quite distinct concepts according to the definitions provided.
Well, so probiotics first.
Probiotics, according to the source's definition, are live microbial food ingredients that are beneficial to health. Basically, live bacteria, or sometimes yeasts, that, when consumed in adequate amounts, confer health benefit.
And there are specific criteria they need to meet.
Yes, quite strict criteria are mentioned. To truly be considered a probiotic in food, the bacteria ideally need to be of human origin, confirmed as non-pathogenic, not causing disease, able to survive the journey through your acidic stomach and digestive enzymes, remain alive and active in the food product until consumption, and have demonstrated beneficial effects in human scientific studies.
And you need a lot of them.
A very large number, yes. The dose matters hugely. Measured in colony-forming units, or CFU, often billions per serving are needed for documented effects. The source even notes that many bio-yogurts might contain live cultures but may not meet all these strict criteria or contain sufficient numbers to be technically called probiotic in a scientifically rigorous sense.
Okay. And the evidence for their benefits, what does the source say?
It mentions some areas with decent support for specific probiotic strains. They can help prevent or shorten the duration of certain types of diarrhea, like antibiotic-associated diarrhea or traveler's diarrhea. They can also help people with lactose intolerance digest lactose better.
What about other claims, like immune support or cancer?
There's accumulating research on their potential role in modulating the immune system, but the source suggests it's complex and perhaps hard to assess definitively just yet. Regarding cancer prevention claims, the source explicitly states there's insufficient evidence.
Okay, so that's probiotics, the live bacteria. What about prebiotics then?
Prebiotics are different. They aren't the bacteria themselves. They are the food for the beneficial bacteria that are already living in your gut.
Ah, feeding the good guys.
Essentially, yes. The source defines them as non-digestible food ingredients, often specific types of carbohydrates, like fructooligosaccharides, FOS, or inulin, that selectively stimulate the growth and/or activity of one or a limited number of beneficial bacteria in your colon, particularly species like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. So they help the existing good gut microbes flourish.
Got it. St. John's wort is another well-known one, often associated with mood support.
It is. It has a very long history of use, traditionally for various nervous conditions, wound healing, and other things.
And modern use.
The source confirms that recent medical opinion generally supports its use specifically for treating mild to moderate depression. However, it explicitly notes it is not recommended for more severe or acute cases of depression.
And how does it work?
Its effects are thought to be related, at least in part, to compounds like hypericin and hypoforin found in the plant, although other substances likely contribute to its overall action. It's complex. The source also mentions it's sometimes used as a flavoring in certain alcoholic drinks, but there are usually limits on the hypericin content due to potential drug interactions and photosensitivity issues.
Right. Soya is a massive global food staple. What are the key takeaways about it from the source?
Incredibly important food source globally, yes. The source highlights its value primarily as a protein source, noting its protein quality is generally better than most other legumes.
Better amino acid balance.
Yes, and especially when paired with cereals, like rice or wheat, it provides a really well-balanced, complete amino acid profile, making it a cornerstone of many vegetarian diets. It's also a source of healthy, unsaturated oil and fiber, though the fiber content is reduced in more refined products like tofu or soy milk.
Any other components mentioned?
Yes, soya is also a source of lecithin, used as an emulsifier, and plant sterols, which we discussed earlier in relation to cholesterol. And significantly, the source points out that specific health claims linking the consumption of soy protein to a reduction in blood cholesterol levels have actually been reviewed and approved by regulatory bodies in countries like the US and UK, which is quite a high bar for a food component.
Okay. Were there any examples in the source material where traditional claims maybe just didn't seem to have much scientific backing or even raise some safety concerns? It wasn't all positive, was it?
No, definitely not. The sources were pretty balanced in pointing those out too. Celery seed, for instance, has various traditional claims mentioned, but the source explicitly notes there is little supporting scientific evidence, only mentioning some animal studies, with no human data presented to back up the claims.
Any safety issues?
Yes. Sweet flag, Acorus calamus, was mentioned. It has ancient uses, but importantly, it contains a substance called beta-acerone, which has been found to be carcinogenic. Because of this significant safety concern, its use in food and even some traditional medicines is now restricted or banned in many places.
Wow, okay. Any others?
Pulsatilla, also known as pasque flower, was another. It has traditional uses related to reproductive and nervous system issues, but the source explicitly cautions about potential toxicity if used incorrectly or in excess. It strongly suggests it should only be used under the strict guidance of a qualified, experienced herbalist due to these risks.
And we already mentioned the lack of support for kelp for slimming.
Exactly. The idea of using kelp or seaweed specifically for weight loss appears to lack scientific support according to the material provided and comes with that risk of excess iodine.
So this journey through all these specific examples really shows the whole spectrum, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got foods with well-established nutrient profiles like nuts or soya. Then you have plants with long traditional uses where modern science is starting to find some supportive evidence like milk thistle for liver or St. John's wort for mild depression, and then others where the claims seem to lack robust support or where clear safety red flags have been raised. It's a real mix.
And it all ties into these broader trends we see in the food market, doesn't it? Like all the products specifically aimed at weight management.
Absolutely. Given how challenging sustainable weight loss can be for many people, the market for slimming aids is understandably significant. Meal replacements were one strategy discussed in the source.
How do they fit in?
They provide a structured way to achieve a controlled, low-calorie intake, maybe around 1,200 kilocalories per day in total. They're typically formulated to provide essential vitamins and minerals to avoid deficiencies on that low intake, and often contain added fiber or protein to help promote satiety, hopefully making it easier for someone to stick to the calorie limit for a period.
And that whole concept of functional food seems to weave through so much of what we've discussed today.
It really does, doesn't it? It's that core idea where food manufacturers identify specific components that are believed or proven to have health benefits beyond basic nutrition.
Like the fibers, the plant sterols, the probiotics.
Exactly. Or phytoestrogens from soy, omega-3s added to eggs, antioxidants, all those bioactive compounds mentioned throughout the sources. And they either concentrate them from the original food source or, more often, add them to other everyday food products, yogurts, spreads, drinks, cereals.
And then market them based on those added benefits.
Precisely. It's a really dynamic and evolving area where traditional knowledge about food and health, cutting-edge scientific discovery about specific compounds, and modern food technology all intersect. Sometimes with strong evidence, sometimes perhaps a bit ahead of the science.
Wow. Okay. We've covered a vast amount of ground in this deep dive. Seriously. We started right back at the fundamental math of energy.
Kilocalories in, kilocalories out.
Then unpack the complex roles of carbs, fats, and proteins. Touch on that vital support system of micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Looked at how we're visually guided to try and eat a balanced diet.
Those plates and pyramids.
And then really delved into this fascinating, sometimes confusing world of specific health foods and plants, comparing that age-old wisdom and traditional use with what the science in our sources is actually telling us today.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here, looking across all this material we discussed, is exactly that interplay, isn't it? It shows us that nutritional science is absolutely a living field, constantly learning.
Yeah.
Sometimes confirming traditional uses for certain plants or foods, finding entirely new mechanisms or benefits for others, and importantly, identifying cautions or lack of evidence where needed. It really highlights the incredible complexity of food. It's so much more than just a simple sum of isolated nutrients on a label.
Absolutely. Hopefully this whole deep dive has given you, our listener, a much clearer picture, maybe provided some of those useful nuggets of knowledge, those aha moments we talked about, to help you navigate this world of health foods and claims with a bit more confidence, maybe feeling a little less overwhelmed by it all.
And thinking about all this, it does raise an important question, doesn't it? Given the incredible chemical diversity we find in the foods and plants we eat, with so many compounds still being researched, and their complex interactions perhaps not fully understood yet.
Right.
Does striving for optimum nutrition really mean meticulously trying to hit specific, isolated nutrient targets based only on today's scientific knowledge? Or is there perhaps still some profound, maybe still undiscovered wisdom in simply aiming for eating a wide variety of whole foods?
Because that might be the most reliable way to benefit from all those synergistic effects, the known ones, and maybe the countless beneficial components and interactions we haven't even discovered yet, all working together.
Exactly. It's something to think about, perhaps.
Definitely something to chew on the next time you're filling your plate.